Good day. We are going to discuss identifying and stating the research problem. We're going to look into the good qualities of quantitative research problem and how we are able to write scope and the limitation of our research. Let's go. So what's a quantitative research? Remember in our discussion last time that a quantitative research focuses on numbers and large samples. So we are going to use a quantitative research problem. A quantitative research problem requires us to adopt an empirical attitude towards our problem. And it depends on our sensory experience, conduct experimentation, or perform a scientific method to arrive in truth of something, which means that our research should be, that our topic should be a researchable problem. According to Apido and Ford on their research article entitled Empirical Attitude, Material Practice, and Design Activities, the empirical attitude is composed or comprised by an active, inquisitive motivation to explore the way nature behaves in ways that informs our ideas about it. And this attitude entails first and foremost the acknowledgement that ideas need to be tested against nature. Ibig sabihin, in order for us to come up with a good research problem, we need to be more empirical. Sabi nga, this empirical attitude should have be more open-minded. Kailangan marunong kang magtanong. You need to be more inquisitive. Kailangan mo laging bibigay or tatanggap ng suggestion mula sa iba at kailangan malawak ang iyong pag-iisip. There are different characteristics of a quantitative research problem. And one of those is that it is characterized by a precision, specificity, or stability. Ibig sabihin, kailangan detalyado, tama, at hindi paligoy-ligoy ang isang research problem. It is also geared towards a possible result. Merong kang pupuntahan. We already discussed that in this manner, we are going to deal with the inductive manner. That we will start from a big idea and we will proceed to a possible result based on the theories that we have already. It is also described as expansive, widespread, and developing. The quantitative research problem focused more on the process rather than the outcome. So we will try to look into paano ba natin gagawin ang ating research problem or ang ating research. So sa pag-develop ng ating research problem, kinakailangan na tayo ay mag-focus sa ating proseso. Dahil ang proseso mismo ay pwede nating palitan in the long way if we are not able to come up with the idea or the outcome that we wanted to have. So in that case, we will repeat the experiment so that our research problem should be attained. What's our sources of quantitative research problem? So the first one is the government agencies or any non-government institutions. In this source of information or the source of this quantitative research problem, we can try to look into the data coming from PSA or any other local government that near to us, especially the barangay. Dito tayo makakakuha ng ano ba ang meron sa ating komunidad. What data is already present that we are going to use or pwede nating magamit sa ating pag-conduct ng ating research. Another type of source of information is our own experience or our own genuine interest in something. Yung mga bagay na komportable kang gawin, yung mga bagay na gusto mong gawin, ay mas madali para sa atin na makagawa ng isang research. Kasi mas mahirap para sa atin na gumawa ng research kung hindi naman natin ito interest. Halimbawa, ikaw ay STEM, tapos ang i-research mo ay tungkol sa humanities. So that doesn't fit your interest in STEM. So kung ikaw din naman ay ICT at or TVL as gagawa ka ng isang STEM research, you will not be able to finish it ahead of time based on the deadline that you have. Kasi nga, it doesn't fit your interest. So you are going to come up with a research problem based on your strand, based on your interest, and based on your own experience. Another type of or another source of quantitative research is that through other findings or other researches. So there is already an existing research that we may validate that kind of research. But in a quantitative research, we are allowed to validate other researches. So we can anchor our new research or our validation research in those previous research findings. And the last source of quantitative research problem is the current issues. Ano-ano ba ang mga nagaganap sa kasalukuyan? Ano na yung mga kinakaharap nating mga problema na pwede nating masolusyonan gamit ang ating mga maliliit na kakayahan. So, let's take note that when we formulate a research problem, we need to, number one, is it researchable? Yeah? There are things that we need to consider. So, here are some points to consider in formulating the quantitative research problem. Number one is the significance. The research problem should add more on the body of knowledge in a specific area. It should serve a purpose on the area of knowledge. Hindi po pwedeng basta makagawa lang tayo. Hindi naman po pwede yung may maipasa lang. So, we need to have the importance of this kind of research to, di ba? Sabi nga, add more to the body of knowledge. Meron siyang kapupuntahan. Hindi yung itatabi lang sa bookshelf ng isang library. Another point to consider is originality. Every research has a unique and the problem should be new. The researcher must possess an innovative knowledge on a topic. Eh sir, sabi mo po kanina, we can validate. Yes, we can validate, but let's take note that when we validate the researcher, or rather the research of the previous findings, we will come up with new idea. We will innovate based on what findings that we had last time. So in doing research, it should always be unique. Hindi po pwedeng umuulit. Hindi po pwedeng kumukopya. Feasible. It could help if the research is appropriate or not. It would help if the study could be carried out. Maaari na maganda ang research, pero sa kakayahan ng isang estudyante ay hindi naman ito kakayanin na gawin. Halimbawa, if you're a STEM student, you want to identify how long do a coronavirus, di ba? The coronavirus be in the surface of a certain material. At this point in time, you as the student don't have the capacity and the resources that you need to do the research. So it will never be feasible. So we need to think of a research, something that is feasible enough, yung maaari nating matapos at magawa sa meron tayo sa kasalukuyan. Researchable. There are some problems that are very ambiguous and somehow unsolvable. Yung mga bagay na hindi basta-basta nasusolve. So binigay na example dito is the existence of God. By faith, we know that there is God. But if we are trying to look into physically, we will not able to research about it. So it's not researchable. Current. So another point to consider is the currency. Ibig sabihin, napapanahon. More researchers would be interested in the study if it's based on current problems. Yung ano ba ang kasalukuyang nangyayari? Ito ba ay o pwede pa o hindi na? Is it interesting? Yes, it's feasible, it's researchable, it's current, but is it interesting? Will the study be fascinated? Will you able to give your full enthusiasm in doing this research? Let's take note that the research that you will do should fit your interest. And last one is ethical. The research question or the research problem is anchored on morally good perspective. So hindi tayo po pwede na labag sa batas ng tao at sa batas ng Diyos. So let's take that these research problems, the ideas that we are going to have should uh, be based on these principles or based on these considerations. Okay? Now, what's a research question? What's the difference between a research problem and a research question? So, see, research question is a sub question or the specific questions that we ask in order for us to answer our research problem. So, we have the main problem and we are going to ask sub questions or specific questions to answer these research problems. So, meron kang problema, hahanapan mo ng solusyon ng problema sa pamamagitan ng pagtatanong. So, this is where inquiry gets into research. So a research question used to specify the scope and the method in collecting and analyzing your data, give you the right direction in your research. By asking questions, you're able to come up with good plan, and because of these questions, you're able to answer your research problem. Let's have an example of a research problem. A research problem in an interrogative form, which means in a question form, will look like this. What percentage of Manila private universities consider the use of grammar textbooks as the most effective way to help college students attain communicative competence? We may present a research problem in a declarative form or declarative statement. The main objective of this study is to find out the percentage of Manila private universities considering the use of grammar textbooks as the most effective way to help college students attain communicative competence. So in this example, we have a problem that focuses on the use of grammar textbook in in helping attain communicative competence to college students. So we have these two different statements, but both of them are just the same research problem. Now, what is the research question that we are going to ask? Sabi this example. In an interrogative statement, we will ask questions, more specific question. So the first one, what is an English grammar textbook? Number two, what is communicative competence? Number three, what components of the grammar textbook for communicative competence development? Or in a declarative statement, we can ask research questions this way. Likewise, this study aims to finding answers to the following specific objectives. Number one, to define grammar textbook. Number two, to explain the meaning of communicative competence. And lastly, to identify the components of the grammar book that work for communicative competence development. Let's take note that if you started with an interrogative statement for your research problem, you should have an interrogative statement for your research question. If you started with a declarative one, you have to use a declarative statement for your research question. Now, let's take note that a good research question should not be answerable by yes or no. And a research question is different to a survey question. So do not ask, what do you have? Or what will you say? Because these statements are for interview or survey questions. You should ask questions that is directly anchored to your research problem. So based on this example, all research questions are anchored in the English grammar textbook and the cumulative competence of the college students. Let's take note. Once there is an idea that pops on your mind, sure to write it down. Why? Because it may be a good idea. So you just need to think and think and think to come up with better and your best idea. Let us watch this next video clip from K State Libraries. So as you can see here, we have the historical context, biological context, and geographical context gives us a way to make our topic, our problem more uh, good. Yeah, it could be a best research problem that we could have. So here we're going to follow whatever that are given to us in the points of consideration. Now let's move on to the scope and the limitation. What's scope and the limitation? Yeah, let's talk about first scope. A scope defines as where and when the study was conducted and who the subjects were. So sino-sino, ano-ano ang mga kabilang sa ating research. So in this one, so here in the scope, we set the limitation and establishes the boundaries of the study. Ilalagay natin, we will state here, ilalagay natin dito kung ano-ano ang mga kasama lamang sa ating research. What is within our research. Also, the scope refers to how far the research area has explored and parameters in the study will be operating in. The type of information to be included in the scope of research project would include facts and theories about the subject of the project. So in terms of coverage, what should be included in the scope? So the coverage of the study is in terms of the following: your general purpose, the population or sample, the time or duration, the subject matters or and topics discussed, and the area of or locality. So all of these five should be present in our scope only, because it will all include the parameters of our research. So for example, I have this scope. This investigation is conducted to determine the status of the teaching of science in the high schools of Cagayan province as perceived by the teachers and students in science classes during the school year 2015-2016. The aspects look into where the qualifications of teachers, their methods and strategies, facilities, forms of supervisory assistance, problems, and proposed solutions to the problems. What is the general purpose? So the general purpose of this study is to determine the status of teaching of science. So here, it is the main problem. What the status of the teaching of science. What's the subject matter? So the subject matter here is the teaching of science. So we are focused on how teachers teach science. So the topics that are being studied here is the qualifications of teachers, their methods and strategies, facilities, forms of supervisory assistance, problems, and proposed solutions to the problems. Who will be our sample and or the population? So our sample here is the teachers and students. Where? Where are we going to conduct the research? Of course, in Cagayan province. And when are we going to conduct this? During the school year 2015-2016. So you notice that all the elements presented should be placed in one paragraph only. So this is how we present the scope. Now, on the other hand, what is delimitation? What's the difference of delimitation to limitation? So what's the other word for delimitations? According to the Thesaurus Plus, it's the other term for this is demarcation, border, boundary line, borderline, disinfection, distinction, sorry, distinction, differentiation, definition, meet, and limitation. So in research, when we say delimitation, these are choices made by the researcher which would be mentioned. Ibig sabihin, tayo na researcher ang magtatakda kung hanggang saan lamang, di ba? Hanggang saan lamang ang ating research. It describes us the boundary that have set for the study. On the other hand, limitation, these are factors that potentially reduce a study's validity and initially scope, and that is out of researchers' control. Ibig sabihin, may mga bagay na hindi natin kontrolado na maaaring mangyari. So these are the limitations. But what we are going to include in our delimitation are the factors and issues not of concerns of the researcher or limitations imposed by us, the researcher. So tayo na yung magtatakda ng mga bagay na hindi dapat at hindi natin isasama sa ating research. So halimbawa, so in this portion, it will explains to us the things that we are not doing, yung mga hindi natin isasama. Another is the literature that we will not review, and the population that we are not going to study. So halimbawa, may specific lang na mga tao ang kailangan mong kasama. But you will not include this and you will write it on your delimitation. And the methodological procedures that you will not use. You are going to be more specific on what to do, on what are you going to have. So here, the scope and delimitation, para lang yung nagtanim ka ng puno ng mangga sa iyong bakuran, pero lumabas ang mga bunga sa labas ng iyong bakuran. So your bakod, yung bakod mo, serve as your delimitation. That's your boundary. Your scope is inside of you. Di ba? So yung mga bunga na nasa labas, hindi mo yun pag-aari. Kasi ang pag-aari mo lang ay lahat ng bunga na nasa loob ng inyong bakod. So in the scope and delimitation, what will you place, what will you study is only inside of your own boundary. Kaya kung ano lang yung nilagay mo doon, yun lang yung iyong pag-aaralan. Let's watch this video clip before we end how we are able to come up with a good scopes and delimitation. This is from the BNCHS STEM Mueller YouTube channel. Let's watch. So there's an example given. I hope that you have learned something today. So this is how we do the research problem and how we write our scope and delimitation. Thank you and good day. Bye.